class. Good morning, everybody. So glad that you're all here with us. This is my first time to teaching here, so I don't know, it's kind of awkward. I've been here for 6 months and yet never sat in this class. I don't really know how it normally goes or how it normally looks. So what I decided is we'll just do it like we do it upstairs with the youth, I guess, and then you guys can see kind of that format, what we do, and kind of how we go through class. The first thing we always do is we share something exciting that happened during the week. And if anyone wants to share something, any big news or something that's really on your heart, we're normally open it up for the kids to share that. So is there anything to share this morning? Mhm. Okay, so yeah. Eh, oh, that's right. Now, you said you were throwing a big party right before she gets here. Sympathy party. So this sounds like a prayer request for the freedom you're going to lose. Okay. Uh, Levi was pointing at his friends. What? Just that they're here today. Yeah. We're glad you guys are here. It's good to see you again. Anything else? Woke up? Okay. Yeah, good. Okay. Who was it? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Her son, Addison, they had a miscarriage, baby. Our heart goes out to you guys, of course, and especially right now with Lizzie and I kind of hoping everything continues to go okay. Um, that's a good lead into the next thing. After we do our blessings, we always do our prayer requests. Anything else we can add to our prayer list? Okay. Okay. So pray for Steve, and who was the other person? Steve and Amanda. Okay. And then Addison and Chapman family. Anything else to add? Yeah, you can pray for that. Okay. Okay, thank you, Aaron. We'll be praying for Melanie. She had texted me this week and told me that. But if you didn't hear, Melanie has two different types of Lyme's disease, and a lot of the issues she's been having were actually from that. It just took them years to find it, right? But now they have a treatment plan and hopefully moving in the right direction. Um, Anything else before we have a prayer? All right, let's go ahead and pray. God, we thank you so much for this day that you've given us. We're so glad that we're able to gather together as the saints, as the church, and as your people. As we go throughout our study this morning and our worship service later, we ask that you be with us. We ask that we have pure hearts and minds, and we're open to learning and to growing and to making the most of this time that we have right here together. God, we've mentioned so many people who are hurting or struggling. Our prayer list is really long sometimes, and I feel like it is right now. We want to specifically pray for the Chapman family and Addison, the loss of the baby. Some people have been through that before, and they know how hard that can be, how discouraging it can be to go through that. And God, we ask that they can find some comfort, that they can find some encouragement, and that they will know that they can get through this, that it'll be okay. I want to pray for the people Margaret mentioned. It sounds like there's some tough situations going on with Steve and the cancer, and then with Amanda trying to take care of her dad. God, we ask that the doctors with Steve will be able to find ways to help, comfort him, and maybe heal the cancer if possible, or take away some of the pain. And we ask that Amanda can find some funds, find some work, money, that a door can be opened there for her. We want to pray for Melanie and the Walker family. We know that they've had a long battle and a long struggle with Melanie's illness, but we're so glad that they finally found out what it is, and we just hope that the doctors can continue finding ways to treat her, and she can continue to improve and hopefully be back to normal. We would love to have that, God. There was other mention that have slipped my mind, or maybe weren't mentioned but are on our hearts, and God, we know you know who they are, and we ask that you be with them, comfort them, lift them up, and if possible, open doors so that we can be a light for them, that we can be that comfort if need be. Through your Son's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so in the youth class, we've been studying through the book of John, and we actually started this back in the fall when I first got here, and we're almost done. We're in chapter 19 of 21. So if you want to go ahead and open your Bibles up to John 19, flip over there. Yeah, I'm not like Rex. I don't spoil you with the PowerPoint. Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint for this. But this study's been really good. John is a unique gospel. Many of you know that. John had more of an intimate relationship with Jesus. When it talks about the disciple who Jesus loved, is talking about John. Everything that John writes is going to be from a slightly different perspective, which I think makes it so unique, which made it such a good study for us to go through it with the kids upstairs. Now, normally what I would do is each kid would take a verse, everyone in class, we would go around and read it. We were not going to do that this morning. I'll just read the verses. But that's typically what we do, and as I get to a verse, if you have a discussion that you want to bring up or a question, go ahead and stop me. That's normally how we do class upstairs. We try to work through the text as slowly as we can, and pulling out everything that we can that we need to know. So leading up to John 19, we're getting really close to the cross. We're getting really close to the crucifixion. And in chapter 18, that's when all the chaos really starts. I mean, the Jews and the Pharisees, all the Jewish leaders, they've been out to get Jesus for really since the beginning of John. They have not been happy with what he's doing, what he's teaching, right? And the reason for that simply is that he's a threat to their power, their authority, right? He's teaching things that they don't want to be taught. And it's really not surprised that that's their reaction. I think about today, right? I don't want to be too extreme, but if someone threatens the way we live our life, right, we're pretty defensive. We don't like that. We just don't want that, right? It's uncomfortable to change, and you could go into so many different things with this, why the Jewish leaders acted the way that they did. But ultimately, they didn't want to lose their power and their control over the people, over the Jewish people. Sorry, let me get this back on. I may need your help again. Okay. I hope you didn't hear that. She said I have big ears. Okay, so John 18, Judas has decided he's going to betray Jesus, and he knows where they're going to be. Scripture says that he knows that they're going to go to this garden John says it's a garden in Kidron. They've been there before. So the trap's basically been set. Judas is going to betray him. And then the disciples, right? Rex has probably mentioned this before, but some of the apostles are still kind of thinking in a worldly sense. They're still kind of thinking in, well, Jesus will surely bring some type of earthly kingdom, even though we're talking about a spiritual kingdom. So when these soldiers come to arrest Jesus, Peter pulls out his sword, and it basically attacks. He cuts off the ear of one of the slaves of the high priest, who we find out his name is Malchus. Now keep that in mind. That'll come important later. Okay, Malchus is the name of the high priest slave. But Jesus, of course, right, says, no, you're not going to fight for me. You're not going to defend me. Heals the man's ear. And then they take Jesus on to the Jewish council, right? Sanhedrin, I'm not an expert on really their law system, but you know what I mean, right? To their leaders so that he can be on trial. Well, they already want to kill him. It's a quick trial, right? Caiaphas is the high priest and basically just sends him on and says, this guy's guilty. We want him dead. But we find out later that they don't have the authority to kill him themselves, right? They don't have the ability to put Jesus to death. So what they have to do, they have to convince the Romans to kill him for them, right? So Jesus goes straight from Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest, over to Pilate, who is the Roman ruler in the area. And for the kids, they've heard this in class, this little review. But when they bring him to Pilate, and again, this is all, I think, important background leading up to the cross. That's why I want to go over this. When they bring him to Pilate, Pilate and the Romans, it's made clear, do not have a good relationship with the Jews. They really do not like their religion, honestly, their customs, everything that they do. And they really interpret it as just them kind of being stuck up, kind of just plain disrespectful. Because when they go to Pilate and they bring Jesus to him, none of his Jewish accusers will actually go into what they call the Praetorium. The Praetorium is where the Roman ruler would basically conduct his business, right? It's like the courtroom. They won't even go in. They say, no, we want to stay clean for Passover. We can't be in a Roman area like that. That's not okay. Well, let's take the Henrietta courthouse, right? I've actually never been there. Do we have a court? We do, right? Okay. Right over there. And let's say that we had a problem with someone among us, and I don't know, if it was the kids, I'd pick on someone. But I won't point anybody out here because you might actually be guilty of something. We don't want to get into that, right? But let's say we're accusing someone of doing a crime against us, against the church, right? Maybe they damaged the building and we want to persecute them. But we feel so high and mighty that when we take them over to the courthouse, right? I know there's police involved in our day and age, but take them to the courthouse and we shove them in the doors and we say, okay, you go in and be on trial and we're going to stay out here because we're too good to go in there. So you look at Pilate's perspective, right? And he's supposed to make a decision on this guy. And they basically throw him in the room with Pilate. And they don't come in to actually accuse him. So Pilate's sitting there like, what are you guilty of, right? Why are you here? Well, Jesus, of course, is going to tell the truth. If he ever needed a chance to get out of it, right, that was one of the chances. He could have said anything. He could have played, the I'm the Son of God card, anything to get out of that trial. But the Jews, to be that disrespectful, right, to just throw him in and say, you take care of the trial, we can't go in there, we're too good to be in that room with you, Pilate, go ahead and interrogate him. Well, the interrogation goes on, and of course, Jesus is truthful about everything that happens. Jesus is not trying to start an uproar. He's not trying to start a rebellion of any kind, right? Because a rebellion would indicate he's trying to bring in an earthly kingdom. He's not going to do that. He's trying to bring in a heavenly kingdom. But through this interrogation with Pilate, he starts to win him over. Pilate is starting to become more and more convinced that Jesus actually might be the Son of God. In chapter 18, verse 37, therefore Pilate said to him, so you are a king. Jesus said, you say correctly that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" When he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you wish that I release for you the King of the Jews?" So they cried out again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. When Pilate asks if Jesus is a king, he tells the truth. He says, "Yes, I am a king, but again, a heavenly one, not an earthly one." But even through all this, all these questions that Pilate asked Jesus, all this interrogation, he comes out into the Jews and he says, "I find no guilt in him." Now, remember, they just threw Jesus in there with Pilate. Pilate has to get up off of his throne, walk all the way out there and talk to them. And he has to do this several times, right? And even though he continues to find Jesus innocent, he's continuing to actually try to be just in how he's judging the situation. His disgruntledness with the Jews and the soldiers, the same thing with the Jews, right? They're upset with them. It increases every time Pilate has to go out, right? So when they see that Jesus is innocent, they're like, "There's no reason this man should be killed, right? We don't want that blood on our hands." And yet the Jewish people continue to say, "No, you need to kill him." Pilate doesn't understand what they're really getting at. In verse 40, I'll read it again. They cried out, saying, "Not this man, don't release Jesus, release Barabbas." And Barabbas was a robber. One of the other Gospels indicates that he was a murderer. It's so fascinating, right, that the Jewish people, the leaders specifically, I don't want to put them all in the group because some Jewish people were becoming believers, but the leaders here specifically, right, the high priest and his people, they're so confused, they're so distraught with Jesus and maybe the threat of things changing in their life that they would rather release a man who has stole, a man who has killed, a man who notoriously was known for doing bad things, over just letting a man who's only created peace and good things walk the earth. And I think about here today, right? Actually, I'll tell this story real quick because I think it's actually pretty relevant. I told Lizzie this recently, but when I was in Tennessee, I was going to school there. I had an internship with the church, and one of the first nights I was there, I got the really loud alert on your phone, that there's either severe weather or Amber Alerts, you know what I mean? And it's so loud and annoying, and if you're dead asleep when it's pitch black, it's kind of terrifying, right? And when that noise went off this time, I'm freaking out. I'm in a new place. I don't know where anything is. And jumped awake, right? And the alert was for an escaped prisoner. And it said, extremely dangerous. This guy has killed people, right? Don't pick up any hitchhikers. And this alert's on my phone. And I'm thinking the whole time, I don't know where this is. Is this down the road? Do I need to start watching out for a murderer? Is he going to break into this house I'm staying in? All these irrational thoughts that you think at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was so scared. I hardly slept a wink the rest of the night, okay? And I tell you that because a man who was known for doing something wrong was let go, and I was worried, man, that might happen to me or might happen to somebody else around here. I don't know. And then nobody would want that, right? Nobody would want to just set loose a murder, a threat to us. And yet the Jewish leaders are at the point where they say, no, we would rather let the murderer go, right? We would rather release this threat back to society because we feel like the risk of us losing our authority and control over the people is a greater risk in their mind than actually a physical threat of someone who's done violent things, right? And you think, how are you at that point? I don't know, right? We'd like to think that we wouldn't be, but the reality is we don't like change. And that's a lot of what this is about. Jesus was going to change everything for them. Going to turn things upside down. All right, John 19. I'm going to read the first couple verses here. Pilate then took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and put a purple robe on him. And they began to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews," and to give him slaps in the face. Pilate came out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." Verse 7, the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid, and he entered into the praetorium again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you, and I have authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given to you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin." Part of giving you all that background, right? This tension is building. The scene is being set. The soldiers and Pilate, again, they've had enough of these people, right? They're so tired of dealing with it that they're going to go ahead. And in these first couple of verses, did you notice what happened? They made the crown of thorns, the soldiers did, and they put it on his head, and they put a purple robe on him. And then when they came up to him, they said, "Hail, King of the Jews." Now, I think sometimes we read this story and we think, why would they mock Jesus like that, right? Why would they treat him that way? And let me give you something you may not have thought of before. Pilate kind of started to like Jesus, right? He says that he's afraid to put him on the cross. He's afraid to continue with this trial because he's starting to believe Jesus is actually the Son of God. And I'm sure the soldiers are kind of feeling that. What the mockery is towards the Jewish people, right? Because when they send Jesus out with a purple robe, which represents what, right? What color does purple represent? Royalty, right? And Lizzie and I actually looked this up, but to make the color purple, why it was so popular, right, amongst royalty, was they had to get it from like oysters. Have you guys ever heard that before? Like it was like a big, oysters, right? It was like a big sea diving excursion to get the stuff to make purple clothes, right? So who can afford that kind of thing? Well, only very rich people, only royalty. So the fact that they go through the effort, right, to make this crown of thorns and to give him this purple robe, that's expensive, right? That's actually a lot of work just to humiliate Jesus. They're not trying to just humiliate Jesus. They're trying to humiliate the Jewish people and the leaders. Okay. And so, of course, they know that if they send Jesus out to the people and they start yelling, "Hail, King of the Jews," this is going to make him more mad. It's just going to continue stirring up the pot. The situation is going to continue to escalate. And ultimately, Pilate gives up. He's like, "I can't win with these people. Jesus, if you would just show me that you're God," right? He says, "Show me basically what I need to know to have just the perfect evidence that you are not guilty," right? Like, Jesus, show this to me and I can let you go. He even says, verse 10, "You do not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you?" Pilate's saying, "Jesus, your fate is in my hands. I want to let you go. Help me out here, right? Do something that lets me know that you are God, that you are innocent of these things." And of course, Jesus doesn't do it. Why not? Jesus has bigger things he has to accomplish. Jesus knows he has to go to the cross. Jesus knows that he has to endure all of this. And as we continue in chapter 19, we're going to see some prophecies that Jesus still has to fulfill before he's done. So Pilate gives in. He turns him over to the soldiers, says that they can crucify him, even though he's declared several times that Jesus is innocent. Chapter 19, verse 15, so they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, shall I crucify your king? And of course, they don't want to hear that. He's not their king. They say, we have no king but Caesar. I couldn't imagine being at that point, right? To where we say, and I'm going to use our current president, so I don't want us to get up in arms, right? That we say, Jesus is no longer our king, okay? God is no longer who we're going to serve. I just want to serve Biden, right? Oof, that didn't sound good, did it? Yeah, it's not supposed to sound good, but that's what they did, right? We would rather serve the king of this land than the king of heaven. Now, I know there's some things that, they're trying to keep their old ways. They're not fully convinced. They're trying to hold on to maybe Jesus isn't the Son of God. I get that, right? But still, just to give up your faith or give up on the prophecies that the Messiah was going to come and just say, no, we pledge all of our allegiance to Caesar. He's our only king. We want to say we wouldn't do that, right? And it hurts my heart to just think that we would do anything like that. But yet we know some people that do, right? Unfortunately, I haven't seen this here, so if you think of somebody, it's not directed at anybody. But there are some that we probably know who put country, right, and the law of the land over everything else. When the government says do this or do that, they do it, right? They're big supporters of, whoever's running for the election, right? We've seen people who do this. And really, I think what it comes down to is a lack of faith. A lack of faith that God will take care of things. Therefore, we put our trust in men over God. Chapter 19, verse 16. About 10 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and read through the crucifixion, and then we can point out some things. Chapter 19, verse 16. So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out, bearing his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It is written, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. Therefore many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but that he said he only claimed, I am King of the Jews. Then Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. Then the soldiers Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to every soldier, and also the tunic. And now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. So they said to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it shall be. This was to fulfill the scripture, they divided my outer garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Therefore the soldiers did these things. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. From that hour the disciple took her into his household. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things had already been accomplished, to fulfill the scripture, he said, I am thirsty. A jar full of sour wine was standing there, so that they put a sponge of the sour wine upon a branch of hyssop and brought it up to his mouth. Therefore, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I know that's a long passage, but It's a familiar one that I think just about all of us you could say back to me, right? You know the scene, you know what happened, you've studied this before. I want to point some things out. Remember when we talked about how Jesus could use his time with Pilate to get out of all this? Right? Do you remember when he prayed in the garden and he said, God, please let this cup pass from me, right? He could have avoided all of this. And I think that he knew, right? It talks about him fulfilling the prophecies in the scriptures to the very end. I think he knew everything that was going to happen. In verse 17, when it says that he bared his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. This cross, I looked it up this morning because I was curious how big would it have been. And assuming Jesus, again, this is all speculation, was somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall. The cross could have been 8, 9 feet tall, 2 feet wide. It's, again, speculation. And 6 or 7 feet across. And the type of wood that was used, some think it was pine, some think it was other. And if you have the answer to that, I'd be open to knowing what kind of tree it might have been. I don't think it was pine. I did see something. I don't know that I believe that. But this cross that he carried himself, after he's been beaten, after he's been arrested, right? He's been through all this. He probably hasn't slept at all the night before. The cross could have been about 200 pounds, right? That's what it's, again, speculated that it was. And I think, how did he have the strength to do that, right? To carry his own cross that he's going to be nailed to carry it up the hill with that kind of weight after being that tired. How do you do that? Now we do know that there was a man who helped him carry his cross for at least part of the way. We read that in one of the other Gospels. But knowing that all of that hardship and all of that really torture and humility is ahead of him, it kind of changes how much I think that Jesus really loves us, right? And how much of the weight of the situation he grasped, right? Of what he had to go through. Buck, would you willingly carry a 200-pound tree up a hill for me? For me, right? It's just, it's mind-blowing to me that he would do that. And before I looked up this morning, I would have never thought it was that heavy either, or that size. Verse 19, Pilate wrote an inscription and put on the cross, and it was written, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. And he wrote it in Hebrew and Latin and in Greek. And when they asked why he wrote that, he said, I have written what I have written. Why would he write it in 3 different languages? He wants everybody to know, right? He wants everybody to know. And when he says, I have written what I have written, it sounds like he believes it. Right? It sounds like he knew what he was doing. Pilate had hit the point where, although this man was going to the cross and he believed Jesus was innocent, he wanted to make sure everybody knew that this is probably the King of the Jews, right? And I'm saying probably from Pilate's perspective, right? This is probably the guy. We probably messed up. It says a couple verses back before, right? It's Pilate starting to get scared. A man who didn't know Jesus more than a couple days. A leader, a ruler, right? Who really didn't have to worry about what anybody thought other than Caesar, is now worried what everybody thinks about Jesus. He's now worried about this whole situation. And again, Jesus changed his heart and his mind towards the situation just a couple days. I think that's so incredible how he could pull that off. How Jesus could work in his life like that. And yet these people who have lived their whole lives waiting for the Messiah to come, right? For at least 400 years, right? The gap between the last book of the Old Testament and then we get to Matthew, right? It's like a 400-year gap. People have been waiting and waiting and waiting for Jesus, and they've heard him teach, and they've been there, and they've been with him. They've seen the miracles, and yet they're not willing to be as bold as Pilate was and declare this is the King of the Jews, right? And Pilate knew him a couple days. And I think about with our faith, right? There are some that we know who have sat in church their whole life. There's some that we know that they know what to do. They know what they need to do to be saved. They know how they need to live their life, and they sit in the pew every Sunday morning. And yet, they don't actually make the decisions that they need to make. And yet, maybe they never actually commit to Christ. Never actually commit to being baptized and being a part of the church. And then you have others who hear it, and right away they get it, right? I'm out of time. I wish I could have gone further in, and we actually didn't even get past what we covered with the kids last week at the youth group, so sorry to them. Nothing new was said to them today. I'll end with this, and this is probably something you've never heard before. Be like Pilate. You ever heard that? No, right? But you saw some of the good things that he did. He tried. Again, he could have completely put his foot down and said, I'm not crucifying Jesus. But he advocated for Jesus. He wanted him to be freed. And then when he realized his hands were tied and he felt like there was nothing to do but allow him to be crucified, what does he do? He declares to the world, in every language that he thought was necessary, that Jesus is king. Something to think about. So that's what I want you to get from today. Go out, and one, don't drag your feet. Don't just be a pew sitter, right? Don't hear the same thing every Sunday and don't make a change. Go out to the world, be like Pilate, and declare to the world, every way that you know how, that Jesus is king. Thank you for class.